minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We have a go for main engine start. 6, 5. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, 0. We have solid rocket booster ignition and liftoff of Challenger and the 10th space shuttle flight. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
Tower, pitch program.
Houston now controlling. Roll maneuver confirmed.
15 seconds.
Good roll.
My name is Gary Files and I'm the director of the Kielder Observatory in Northumberland, the United Kingdom. And I've came here to sunny California, to Pasadena, for Spacefest 2014. And the reason I've came here is because some of the most important people in the history of space exploration have gathered here, including men who walked on the moon. Bruce McCandless II is a former naval aviator with the United States Navy and former NASA astronaut. During the first of his 2 space shuttle missions, he made the first ever untethered free flight using the manned maneuvering unit in 1984. McCandless logged over 312 hours in space, including 4 hours flight time on the manned maneuvering unit.
I came into the space program in 1966 in June. Left at the end of August 1990 and served a variety of non-flying positions during Apollo and Skylab, and made 2 space flights aboard the shuttle.
Incredible stuff. Bruce, as far as you're concerned, what was your most valuable contribution to the space flight program?
Well, my belief is that in a pedestrian fashion, I nonetheless worked very hard on making the Hubble Space Telescope maintainable on orbit by a crewman in a pressure suit in a weightless environment, because we were concerned with coming up with a set of tools that fit all of the interfaces and that were usable in weightlessness, and also in modifying the various assemblies, some of which had previous flight history, so that they could be readily identified and readily removed and replaced by a crewman in bulky pressure suit gloves using the tools that we had developed. We thought that we were ahead of the game and that the only things on the Hubble that we could not replace on orbit were the main wire harness and the primary and secondary mirrors. And of course, history has shown that the biggest single problem was with the primary mirror. So on the 1st of September of 1990, I was on an airplane headed for Munich, where we had a strategy or a salvage team meeting at the headquarters of the European Southern Observatory. And from that meeting came the strategy of building a corrective instrument, spectacles if you will, that could replace one of the 4 existing axial scientific instruments and correct the vision of the other 3. Now the 5th instrument, the wide field planetary camera, was replaced with a wide field planetary camera with corrections built in on the first servicing mission. So by the first servicing mission, we had everything corrected, and the telescope was actually exceeding its predicted performance.
The Hubble Space Telescope absolutely it's revolutionized how we see the universe around us. And having a telescope suspended in space, in near-Earth orbit, is phenomenally important. But of course you've got first-hand experience of being in that environment. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Bruce, please?
Well, certainly, but from the telescope perspective, there are several major advantages. The first is that you're away from the filtering aspects of the atmosphere. Down here on Earth, the spectral sensitivity of our eyes is roughly from the blue down into the red. And that's not by chance. That's because these are the wavelengths that come through the atmosphere relatively unattenuated, and consequently over tens of thousands of years of evolution, we have adapted to use those wavelengths. But when you go to observe in, say, the ultraviolet or the far infrared, you have to get up above the atmosphere so that you can pick up these wavelengths unattenuated. Another is that while we have developed some techniques for correcting for the atmospheric oscillations that cause the stars to twinkle so beautifully, from an astronomical perspective, you don't like twinkling stars. And when you get above the atmosphere again, the stars don't twinkle. And lastly, I guess you could say, is that with the Hubble orbit, there are regions of the sky which vary somewhat due to the season, that we can observe continuously for days on end with no transition from night to day or vice versa. And that enabled us to make the so-called ultra-deep field exposure. So there's really a whole suite of advantages to being above the atmosphere. Now, from a human perspective, spaceflight is really very pleasant. There is a brief adaptation period, and then you can enjoy the weightlessness, the freedom, if you will, to move in all three dimensions without being constrained to standing on a floor. You can also get an unparalleled view of the Earth. Everyone, I say, that's flown in space has come back remarking about the beauty of the Earth and the lack of visible political boundaries and political subdivisions. No, it's true. You can see the geographic features, and they're beautiful. You can also see that large swaths of territory appear as one, and this, of course, stimulates the question as why we can't learn to get along together and cooperate for the benefit of humankind and of planet Earth.
An absolutely incredibly important message that the next generation have to be told. And I think, the Apollo astronauts and yourself included, of course, you're the best ambassadors for that. If you had a message for the next generation, Bruce, for the next generation of scientists, space explorers, or even people who just want to learn more, what message would you give them out of all your years of experience?
Well, in looking for a message, this may seem strange, but I would encourage people to not attempt to do what we have already done, not to, quote, reinvent the wheel, unquote, but to take all this stuff as a given, as a floor or a platform from which to do bigger and better things.
Absolutely, because it's a big universe and there's a lot more to explore. Bruce McCandless from Pasadena, California, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.